Hi, I'm horror author Paul Edwards. Today I'm reading Horror Monsters Magazine, issue number 8 from 1964. I thought you might enjoy flipping through this vintage magazine with me. Together, let's see what kinds of Monster Kid goodness is in here. The severed head on the cover of Horror Monsters number 8 probably made it stand out on the magazine rack at the newsstand. I'm not sure how many other magazines that month had a severed head featured on the cover. Of course, we're talking about the head from The Brain That Wouldn't Die. And that's our cover story in this issue. We're also going to get The Fly, Where Monsters Walk, the true story of a master monster. It's fantastic, weird, and horrifying. And it's all for only 35 cents because this is 1964. All right, let's jump in. I should warn you right up front, the pages are loose here, and a couple of the pages deep within the magazine are completely detached. So if I'm moving a little gingerly, that's why. Okay, so let's see what we get in this issue. Whose Mummy Are You? The Brain That Wouldn't Die, Shock Theater, The Fly, The Invisible Man Returns, Where Monsters Walk, From Hell It Came, I remember that, and then Shock Featurettes. You're going to see it's different versions of the same gag. So that's all right, though. Whose mummy are you? Well, of course, Universal Studios' first mummy was Imhotep, played by Boris Karloff. But then in all those mummy sequels in the 40s, it was a different mummy. It was Kharis the mummy. Here, Tom Tyler played Kharis in The Mummy's Hand. But then in the next 3 films, it was Lon Chaney Jr. playing the mummy. Now, if they had Imhotep versus Kharis, that's a story they never did. Mummy versus mummy. So in the 1932 film, The Mummy, Boris Karloff played the ancient Egyptian wizard Imhotep, but he was only wrapped in bandages in the opening scene of the film. For most of the movie, he went around like this. Spooky looking, but not wrapped in bandages. And he walked and talked as any human being would. It was only when they rebooted the Mummy franchise in the 1940s that we got this kind of mummy, which is what we think of today as the Mummy, where the character is completely wrapped in bandages the whole time and never says a word and just shuffles inexorably after his victims. This was from Lon Chaney Jr.'s first time in the role in The Mummy's Tomb. This mummy is not supposed to be good. This is Abbott and Costello, the famous comedy team, in Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. This mummy, though, is absolutely horrifying. This is from the Hammer Films 1959 version of The Mummy, which starred Christopher Lee as the Mummy and Peter Cushing as Dr. Banning, the good guy. You can tell how old this magazine is. In a recent remake of The Mummy, because it had only been 5 years since this had come out. One thing this magazine was good at was giving you full-page pictures to use as pinups. In other words, you could cut this page out of the magazine and stick it up on your bedroom wall or put it in your notebook or something like that. for your fiend file. I guess you could keep a fiend file too. Just have a collection of them. Okay. Come with horror monsters into a terror-filled world of science gone mad. Chilling, thrilling drama of the transplanting of living pieces of the human body. Yeah, well, if you've never seen this film, a scientist wants to preserve the life of his fiancée who should have been killed in a terrible accident. And he's got not just her brain, like the title implies, but her whole head, her whole severed head, alive, kept alive artificially in the lab. And he's looking for new parts to build her a new body. That's the premise of the movie. Oh, yes. And she doesn't appreciate his hard work. The ingrate. Now, I'm sure you can probably guess how they did this special effect when the actress was actually interacting with the actors and, you know, moving her eyes and moving her mouth and talking and everything like that. Yeah, that's right. The actress was just in underneath the table that had a hole cut in it and it had this covering on it. You know, she was sticking her head out as if it was a severed head in the tray. Sometimes, because her character's name is Jan, sometimes this creature is derisively called Jan in the Pan. Yep. Oh, Jan in the Pan. So when the scientist, who's the villain of the piece, it goes looking for new body parts, he's prowling around town looking for beautiful women who he can scrap for parts. That's basically what he's doing. He also has, this is actually a little bit better part of the story, he has hidden in a special side room some sort of an unspeakable abomination that only moans and growls. And we're not sure what it is, but there is a second monster. Besides Jan in the Pan, there's also a second monster, and it reaches out and gets people. And only at the end of the film do we see it. This is the hideous monster that was lurking in there. It wasn't quite what we expected. We were expecting something a little more far out, but it was creepy. Okay, this scene, sometimes people laugh at. I actually found completely horrifying. And it is the doctor's assistant gets attacked by the hidden monster in the separate room. And the scientist's arm, the assistant's arm, is completely torn off. And so he's staggering around the lab, profusely bleeding. And this lab is in the scientist's house, the main scientist's house. So he goes upstairs into the living room and he's wandering around bleeding like crazy, clearly losing consciousness, and then stumbles back down and finally expires. And I realize that people find this scene funny, unintentionally funny. To me, it's horrifying, though. It really is. I don't know. Maybe because I saw it when I was younger and it was horrifying to me then. That's probably the reason. Yeah. Oh, and just in case you were wondering, everything and everyone is destroyed at the end, so no sequel. Ghoul Giggles. All right, some of these are so obvious. What low-hanging fruit is this? I'd like you to meet my mummy. That's such low-hanging fruit. Please. Please. This is a little better. Cynthia, how many times must I tell you not to send my shirts to that laundry again? This is actually probably the best one. Beverly Garland in The Alligator People. And she's singing, Puff the Magic Dragon Lives by the Sea. That's a little funnier. Okay, shock theater. Shock theater, in a way, is responsible for all of the monster fandom that includes my videos and my book series and everything. Here's what happened. In 1957, Shock Theater came out. It was a package of pre-1948 horror movies that was rented out to local TV stations around the country. It had films like, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Wolfman, The Invisible Man. And for a lot of children growing up in the late 1950s into the 1960s, this was their first exposure to the classic monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein, and so forth. And this is where we get the trope of people staying up late at night to watch a scary movie on TV. It all comes from Shock Theater. So the first wave of monster kids were the kids who were watching this stuff between 1957 and about 1965. I was only born in 65. I was in what's called the second wave of monster kids. We were growing up in the 70s, and by our time, there were Shock Theater-like programs all around the country. In our TV network, they were on Saturday afternoons. Creature Double Feature ran on Saturday afternoons. And in your TV market, I'm sure there was something like Shock Theater back in the 60s and 70s. And if you remember what it was called, please tell us in the comments. I'm interested to hear what some of them were around the country. But they all can be traced back to Shock Theater. So here's a few Shock Theater films. The Cat Creeps, and they're giving you a synopsis of the movies. The Strange Case of Dr. RX. The Frozen Ghost. That's funny because I just did a video reviewing the Frozen Ghost like, I don't know, a week ago or something. You can find that easily enough on my channel. The Man Who Cried Wolf. Night Key is actually not exactly a horror story, but it's a spooky crime story starring Boris Karloff. Sometimes those kind of films made it into the Shock Theater packages too. There was Shock Theater, and then there was Son of Shock, where they released even more movies. Ooh, The Fly. Yikes. I'm probably the only person that prefers the Return of the Fly Monster to the original The Fly Monster. I liked the bigger, oversized head on the second monster. One thing they did in this series that is almost never done is that the first film was in color and then the first sequel was in black and white. They would never do that in any other franchise. So if you're seeing The Fly for the first time and you don't know what to expect of the creature, this actually was really well done and very creepy. When the scientist, we knew he was disfigured and hiding his head under that hood, but we had no idea just how bad it was going to be, that he basically had a fly head. Of course, that's David Hedison. In this movie, he billed himself as Al Hedison, but for most of his career, he went by David Hedison, playing the scientist, Andre. This is the second movie we've seen in this magazine where the scientist had a lab in his own home. Okay, so something is missing here. I want to point this out to you. Page 26, page 29, okay? So we're missing 27 and 28. That page is not in here. It has never been here since I've owned the magazine. The previous owner was on watch when the page went missing. But obviously, they've gone into the Invisible Man sequels. The Invisible Man Returns is this one. This is a publicity film. In the movie itself, you don't see this image of where the Invisible Man is standing. This time around, the Invisible Man was played by Vincent Price. Claude Rains had played the Invisible Man back in the 30s. In this film, Vincent Price took over. You know, it's funny because a while back I was thinking about the Scream franchise, and I was thinking, oh, it's pretty clever that Ghostface is a different person in every movie. And then I realized the Invisible Man was a different person in every movie half a century earlier. Yeah, it was never the same Invisible Man twice. All right, this page is completely detached. This is how the previous owner lost that other page, so beware. Yeah, this was the scene where he started losing his marbles. The disagreeable drunk, who is the bad guy's henchman, Cobb, is played by the actor who played Alfred on Batman in the 1960s. This is another publicity image. This happens in the movie. This event happens in the movie, but this scene is not in the movie with the Invisible Man seen as an outline. That doesn't happen. They're making that up for the publicity image. Here's another one like that. All right, are you ready for another round of these? The real movie pictures with joke captions. I wish you kids would stop throwing stuff on my doorstep. Yeah. Darling, I'd like you to meet my family. This is the best one. Of course, this is the way I cut the hair of all my clients. Just because you're my wife makes no difference. I'm not sure I would trust him, lady. J. Carrol Naish. If you're a monster kid, you probably know him best as Daniel the Hunchback from House of Frankenstein. Or you might know him from his final film, Dracula versus Frankenstein, in which he played the Dr. Frankenstein character. He was very ill at the time he filmed that. It was not a great performance, but it was his final film, and it's one that monster kids do know. He actually had a pretty good run in Hollywood, though. He played the detective solving the case in The Beast with Five Fingers, which was a crawling hand story. In fact, it was the definitive crawling hand story. Oh, in fact, there he is playing the detective in The Beast with Five Fingers. There he is in Strange Confession. That was one of those Inner Sanctum mysteries starring Lon Chaney Jr. Monster Mailman. Wait, are these delivered by an actual monster? An actual monster mailman? It'd be worth buying one just to see that. Yeah. They're quizzing you, what movie did this picture come from? But they give you joke answers, so it's easy to find the real one. For instance, I'm pretty sure this one is not from Fun in Acapulco or War and Peace. Goon with the Wind. Are they trying to emulate the puns that Forrest J. Ackerman was making over at Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine? What's this one from? Is it Love Makes the World Go Round? Gosh. Who is this? Is it Elizabeth Taylor? Rudolph Valentino, Abraham Lincoln, or Peter Lorre? I know you know the answer to that one. From Hell It Came. This was a sort of a voodoo monster movie. Oh. Look, they give you a play-by-play. That's pretty good. Yeah, I had very little sympathy for the woman who betrayed the first guy and then was so terrified when she was put on the hit list of the Tabanga monster. Huh. Iron-On movie monsters. I don't remember this ad in any other magazine. 6 famous fiends in vivid colors that you can iron on. But this thing where they have the giant heads on the character, it's called super deformed, the super deformed look. Some people just love that. I can't stand it. I think it's so stupid. Sorry if you're a super deformed fan. They make super deformed figures of, like, I collect a lot of kaiju, a lot of Godzilla and those kind of figures. There's a whole bunch of them that are super deformed. I never bother with those. Some people just love them. I just don't see the appeal. Oh, you can get disappearing ink. Oh, a shrunken head. Nice. A rubber hammer. Shark tooth necklace. Wow. We really are in the 60s here. I'm not loving this Frankenstein mask. No. There's a lot better ones than that. Now, often you see ads for this poster. These were life-size posters of the monsters. But it's not that often that you see one for the Dracula companion monster. Yep. Monstrous Comics. Actually, this was the 1960s, so Monster Comics there was slim pickings for Monster Comics. Oh, I see. Yep. So Steve Ditko did do a series of comics on 3 monsters that all happened to come out in 1961. Conga, Reptilicus, and Gorgo. He drew comics for. So I guess that does count as a 60s monster comic. But because the code was in effect, there were very few monster comics. See, now, how can they have a photograph of Dracula when vampires can't be photographed? Ah, shouldn't that just be a photo of the door behind him? I'm not sure what makes this a monster record player other than the fact that you're buying it out of a monster magazine. But for $1, hey, why not? Vampire photos. Oh, well, now this should be a complete washout, right? 6 vampire photos. If vampires can't be photoed, this should just be 6 photographs of just the background, right? Yikes. Do-it-yourself werewolf kit. You get the werewolf curse, a werewolf calendar, origin and history of werewolves, and werewolf fangs. Wow. See, now you thought you had to be bitten by the last werewolf and live in order to become a werewolf, when in fact, you could have just ordered it out of the back of a magazine for $1. Wow. If you enjoy classic monsters and vintage horror, you would love my book series, the Mourner's Woods books. I've written a series of novels for people who like 20th century monster movies. I've got different monsters in each book, different cast of characters in each book. They're available on Amazon. I sell them dirt cheap, as cheaply as Amazon allows me. That means 99 cents for an ebook. They're also available in paperback and in audiobook. My books are the Mourner's Woods books. The link to find them is in the description to this video. My name again is Paul Edwards. Thanks for spending some time going through Horror Monsters Magazine, issue number 8 with me. I'll see you in Mourner's Woods.